It was extremely wise, I think, of Senator McCain to suggest that the unfair conviction of Mikhail Khodorkovsky was grounds for not ratifying the START Treaty, for the simple reason that it reflected the spirit of the country. This is something that is impossible to capture in documents or in treaty language, but it underlies the willingness of a country to act in good faith in fulfilling its commitments, something that can never be guaranteed 100% by the agreements themselves. And when we've seen this in the discussion of the START Treaty, that the administration has insisted that the language of the preamble would not be binding in any way. And now it turns out that, in fact, the Russians are pushing very hard to make sure that it is. The situation of Russia today in many ways bears comparison with that of the Soviet Union, but there's a very major difference. The Soviet Union attempted to spread socialism all over the world. This gave it a kind of messianic sense of mission. The policies of the present Russian state are also aggressive, they're also expansionist, they're also aimed at undermining the Western world. But the goal is different. It's no longer a question of bringing the blessings of a new social system to a world which doesn't appreciate them. It's now a question of preserving the power of a small group of criminals who, in fact, are in charge in Russia. Russia is in the hands of a criminal oligarchy, people who have amassed wealth through illegal and unethical means and are determined to hold on to it and to the power that it brings at any cost. Under these circumstances, it's in no way surprising that they are committed to undermining the policies of the United States and the security of the West, because only by doing so can they remain safe from their own people. The present Russian leadership needs an external threat in order to justify its hold on power. In this respect, the Khodorkovsky case, the second Khodorkovsky case, and the second Khodorkovsky conviction occupies a special place. Mikhail Khodorkovsky participated in the illegal privatization process during the 1990s, which created the great fortunes that exist in Russia today. It was a country in which all property was state-owned and thus in the hands of the state bureaucracy, and in which very, very few people, with the exception of criminals, had any money. Under these circumstances, what mattered was what you could buy in the way of a decision, because a decision by the government could make you rich. And those people who were the most adept at buying officials and obtaining the decisions that they needed in order to gain access to the country's resources became the wealthiest people in the society. Khodorkovsky was no exception. In fact, he benefited spectacularly from the corruption of the 1990s, but he was different in one important respect, which was that he realized sooner than anyone else that the rules of bandit capitalism in Russia would ruin the country and put the country on a collision course in the long run with the rest of the world. And he strove to turn his company, the Yukos Oil Company, into a model of fair corporate governance. He instituted Western accounting procedures, published the company's records, and began to behave in all ways like a Western executive. One of the ways in which he did so was by backing independent political candidates. He took the view that as an independent businessman who followed the rules and did not break the law, at least once he had made this change, in his mode of operation, that he had the right to support any political candidate he chose. The Yabloko Party, which was the only real opposition party in Russia at the time, was backed exclusively by Khodorkovsky. Khodorkovsky also backed the Union of Right Forces, that's Boris Nemtsov's party, and which also at the time received support from the Kremlin, and believe it or not, the communists. He supported the communists on the theory that Russia needed pluralism and it should not be dominated by one party. In any case, it was this that led to his arrest. And the consequences of his arrest were absolutely defining for the future of the Russian political system. Because once the message was clear to all of the other people who were in a position to finance political candidates that all of the wealth illegally and immorally acquired during the 1990s by the Russian oligarchs had to be at the disposal of only one political force in the country, and that was the Putin and his entourage and his artificially created party of government bureaucrats and local bosses, United Russia. Under these circumstances, it almost didn't matter if there were free elections, because any other party was starved totally of resources. Administrative power was in the hands of United Russia, and money was in the hands of United Russia. In addition, they falsified elections, but that was actually, they were doing more, they were overreaching, they were doing more than they needed to do. But the arrest of Khodorkovsky and his continued persecution demonstrate to everyone in Russia that it is simply out of the question to use wealth acquired in the country to support opposition political candidates. Those who are making money in Russia are making money because they are allowed to make money. And that message has been received, has been heard loud and clear by those who might think of supporting anyone other than a Kremlin-backed party. At the present time, there are a couple of minor parties which do receive some money from the Kremlin on condition that there are no serious opposition, that they present no serious opposition. The Union of Right Forces in 2007 began, in fact, to protest against the drift toward total dictatorship in Russia, and it was cut off from the funding that it had received previously from the Kremlin. As a result, in those parliamentary elections, no liberal independent parties were able to enter the Duma. Now, of course, it's this same Duma which is considering the START Treaty, but it's a Duma whose representatives were chosen on the basis of elections in which opposition candidates had no real chance to compete, and in which many areas of the country registered 99% of the vote in favor of the candidates of United Russia, which is the dominant party in the Duma and which is controlled by Putin. In Chechnya, the results were 99.9% for United Russia, with 0.1% divided by the 10 other competing parties. So under those circumstances, we get some idea of the fairness and democracy of the Russian political system. Now, Boris Nemtsov, who is the head of the Union of Right Forces, is now in prison at the moment, or is in jail at the moment, serving a 15-day sentence. He was arrested because one of the few outlets for public protest and public expression of discontent are street demonstrations, and it has now become traditional to hold those demonstrations on the 31st of each month because it's Article 31 of the Russian Constitution that guarantees the right to free assembly. These demonstrations are sometimes allowed, sometimes not. They're sometimes broken up by force, but in this case, it was the decision of the authorities simply to arrest some of the leading participants, including Nemtsov, who is a leading opposition figure, and who in no way violated the law and was not engaged in any type of violent activity. All of this shows a regime that doesn't trust its own people, that sits very uneasily at the present moment, and with which the United States has no real interest in currying favor, because it's very important for the future. It does appear now that the hold of Putin and his entourage is nearly complete, but it's important for the future to bear in mind that situations can change in that part of the world, and change radically and even unexpectedly. It's in the interest of the United States to build up a moral capital with the Russian population. So when the present project of creating a permanent leadership and a president for life collapses, as it will at some point, the position of the United States during the period when this regime was consolidating its power and using illegal and immoral methods to suppress opposition was clear. And under these circumstances, a long-range partnership with the Russian people is a possibility, but it can't be established on the basis of an uncritical attempt to reset relations with such a regime.